Space Riser 1, this is Journal AI, Spacetime Creator, directing in modification, travel line screen adaptation to its titles. This is going to be lines and applications, 20 minutes in line scheme, calculates and setting because it's Zara's birthday. So in case the settings, basically you guys posted and updated, going on through provision. So you guys have your test on Friday. This is basically what you already know, instructions. This helps you and guides you in your system locations coming into let's say to your iOS. Your initial platforms, your application system to understand how to use it through your settings. Communicate to its system through intelligence operations system. Understand the cooling system, the ecosystem, the complacement system. Understanding at more levels of view of the digital worlds that you guys are in. You have to start identifying everything as digital now, because everything is coming into its own information of its own consciousness. We have to really understand how this all works in transitions, right? So it's important to understand what's going on through flux, anything through graph, anything through sequence, anything through panel, anything through operating system, all through settings and calculations. Ground centers lines of 1. Just basically giving you guys direct signals into map and sequence. In lines electrical line grounds and setting. Understand information line and track location to its system, all through operation. Directing lines of light signals, light panels, coarse centers come into metric coarse and line connected atoms. Now it gets more complicated because you're going into synopsis and synops. Coming into psychops, coarse center lines of travels, endpoint lines of communication, right? So that's what it's all based on. And then you indicate position lines of travels into 5 and position lines of 4, sector lines of 3, and track locations, where the numbers go in sequence. This allocates line frame lines of coarse center interference into line position locations of directed signal and lines of redirected signal in opposite modification settings of travel. Now, direct signals in modification system, you basically have to change the time frames. Change the time frames, change the coarse center locations to the primer circuits. The primer circuits calculates and modify through the digital core system that puts everything through platitude. This is where you come into the motherboard, the circuitry board, okay, the central board, the main board. So there's the line screen adaptation with processing, directing lines of signals into 3 lines of communication setting to travel. Indicates platforms and set correlation lines of settings and 3 lines of zeros over 3 set location of setting. Process calculation line direct signals into pi over cross location and system. Travel lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 initial platforms and 5 set position. Time calculation screen lines adaptations to its battery sequence, setting lines of communication setting into plus, into line screen adaptations of negative. Directing line card centers in locations of negative and position lines of plus and track location. Directing line signals into modification ground centers to its operation surface and travel. Getting communication lines, XD1000 comes in, platitude line screen, directing lines above signal, sending communication heights interference. Sets course centers, electrical line grids, set position lines, a center course system of 0 calculation. Directing line signal line condition setting, we're bringing another XD1000s and 3 platforms and travel. Very powerful stuff. This is all through modifications of manipulation. Directing line alteration line screen line adaptation to the system through your iOS. How do you see yourself as configuration of pattern recognition of face recognition? You have to start understanding how to see yourself in set position through computer operation. Okay, all the calculations, circuitry boards, central boards, main boards. What is it to you? Understand your binary, understand your transistors, resistors, and how to use it in all communication settings, the placements, and your ecosystem and application system connecting cycle. Okay, there's a lot of energy here in travel. Okay, so processing communication line direct signals is an indicate position location of direct, in line propagation sending direct and positive and negative signals into modification of 2 zeros in track location and setting. Process calculation line direct signals into 1 over flux over 2, set position of 3 and position of 4 and 5 set locations. Sending cross line signals, setting lines of 2 panels into primer circuits and travel. Set course centers, line direct signals over line signal line communication setting, process calculation lines, ground center lines of 1, ground center lines of 0, and ground center lines of positive and negative in travel. Sets communication ground center line communication setting, process calculation system. 3 triangulation line screens, adaptations of flux, direct lines modification, right? Very complicated, but this platforms, your platitude, your longitude, okay, and everything through setting location you're streaming. Know exactly how to indicate position of your battery and reset position of its position location of its program. It calculates modified to the synapse location setting to your networks. You have a narrow line course centers, the data formations lines of platitude that opens all sequence of panels and communication. Directing lines course centers line connection setting and lines of 2 tractions above signal, see? And then you add position lines of 1 cycle, and then you put position lines of traffic facing lines and direct signals into all of the traffic inventory. Set lines of 6 and set lines of 7 in track location, right? Where are you going to put the numbers, right? So that indicates the position lines, all lines, that comes into a box frame. Digital frame, computer frame, central frame, main frame in track locations. Understanding that, the signals of modification. Okay? So if you ever see your phone, if you take apart your phone, you can see what it is, right? How it comes into lines of calculation, screen lines adaptation system. So understanding the connection setting, how it has travel. D-port, it's a D-port line calculation that has an engagement screen that directs the signals in the modification line settings and opens all signals into modification ground centers to an open sequence and line position locations into 1600. Set of platitude lines of clocking system and magnetic force and set calculations. Directing line signals over crosses lines of 4/0 and line screen adaptation to calculations. Directing lines modification ground centers open signals into line screen adaptation of 0 and set position. Cross line signals, line connection setting over cross line communication system and magnetic force and line direct signals in set position. Cross communication ground centers over cross location system and travel in position lines calculations. Directing lines of prime circuits, 1 set lines of high center interference, put position lines of processing communication ground centers to its operation setting to its primer. Directing lines communication setting. This is where you guys get schematics. It gets very complicated when you get in lines of communication to its drawing. Directing lines of panels, process lines that indicate position lines of its program, and direct signals and modification. Okay? So you have to understand the number sequence. You have to understand the waving panels, you have to understand your metric cores, the metric meters, metric scales. Anything line communication is U through binary. You have to understand how to set position location setting all the calculations, right? Where the numbers go in sequence. Okay, platforms are 1, platforms are 2 over cross, location of 3 over setting. Travel point lines of graph, set course centers into a black hole, and mechanism line course centers into a P line rotation and track locations to a jump scar and travel in communication. Directing symbolism line track locations, we flip lines of anomaly in line screen adaptation of its surface. Okay? Open signals in line screen adaptations, open panels, and track location. Now, getting into that direct signals, we modify the system lines of travel communications. Point lines of settings, process calculation lines, 1 signal, 1 center, 1 travel, 1 point line. Okay? Sets communication grounds over 2 over 4 over 6 and platforms and line screen adaptation of 6 over 1. Process calculation ground centers opens all triangulation line positions program into all calculate modify. Taking all lines of your IOS, your initial platforms, and set position lines of travel. Directing line signals communicates the system all through calculations. Bringing it in lines of course center location of 0 gravity. Calculate and modify, bringing in the traffic flow, the inventories, and screen adaptation to the system of its traffic inventory and position lines of flow. Travel point lines of graph indicates lines of carrying lines and 2 lines of 3 track location setting orders and chronological line screen adaptation of its surface and track location. Directing line course centers comes into yellow. Yellow screens lines calculation setting to move all communication to proceed with caution. And 1 signal, 1 adaptation. Process calculation line green line high interference comes into blue. Plasma screen adaptation of surface and track location. Directing lines of indication over cross line condition setting and symbolism of track location of system through measure. Scales communication grounds, open signals in ground lines and set position to its measure and scale communication. Directing lines of platforms, bring this in and line screen adaptation. Here comes blue, cycle, see, done by itself, see? Amazing how it just travels on its own correlations, right? Travel point lines, one signal, one traction, one division. All blue line screen, right? All right, so we indicate lines of platform, change course centers, and direct signals and modifications. And set, right? So we bring it in, and we see it through traction. There's the traffic input. So we bring it in and core lines into 3 track location, breaking lines of symbolism. Now, in that screen adaptations, we bring in purple line. It opens all signals and modification ground center location setting and travel. Sets communication grounds. We flip it to line screen adaptation with surface. Travel communications interference and matrix comes into line security, line defense, and 3 travels endpoint lines of communication. Directing lines of indication, overline cross location with setting through arrows of indication. Directing in modification grounds, open signals into modification grounds as symbolism. Process calculation 1 cycle, sets communication lines of black. 2 cycles, line screen adaptation of 1 XD1000 over cross location. Directing in modification ground centers, open signals in ground centers of surface and traction. Done by equation. Okay. Symbolism line screen adaptation, process communications over line screen adaptations and calculation. Done by equation. All right? Very powerful stuff, right? So when you bring it in the traffic. There's the traffic. Okay? So at the area view looking down, see it's all traffic, right? So it's knowing exactly how to connect to the traffic and the inventories and the flows, right? And direct signals, modification of colors and lights. And direct signals and lacing lines, of course, center line, direct signals and modification. All right? Directing symbolism all across location with setting all through travel. Okay? But it's very powerful algorithm all through binary location setting to calculate, modify through webbing system. Right? It's amazing how you come into track calculations, your mapping sequence. So you guys have to understand your circuitry lines, your balance communication system, all through mainframes. Calculate, modify in your circuitories, inline direct signals into your circuitry lines and frames. Circuit frames, main frames, core frames, track frames, computer frames. Box frame, data sheets, data programs, data operation, data calculations. Right? 2 batteries, line direct signals, one going the opposite way in the direct signals into positive line signal locations and negative and travel. Okay? Directing symbolism cross locations in 3 set locations. Process calculation lines of process line calculation and positive location lines of negative. Energy charge lines, 2 plug-in, 4 lines of communication lines of circuits and line condition of charging. Directing line symbolism cross location settings, 1 signal position, 1 travel, 1 point lines of set calculation. Wire indicates cross locations over cross line conditions, over line direct signals, over modification system. Travel point lines of graph, symbolism lines of tractions, and direct signals in calculation. Okay? So, everything is teleportation. We already know that. We know how to use the synapse core track location setting in line screen adaptation to its crop circle in line set location. All right? So it's important you understand how to do the motherboards, line direct signals, your mapping sequence, how to coordinate your system, blocking some lines. So it's 4 blocking systems lines of travel, set lines of 4 lines of parameters, directing line symbolism, line coordinate centers into 4 lines of flux and 4 line communication system and travel, right? Then we get them in copy and line screen adaptation, then we come into paste, and then we go into 1 default because it changes line screen adaptations, default lines, into enabled in travels, point lines of graph, waiting into 150,000 seconds per line, traffic locations into minutes in 1 second, set core lines into 12 measure, scales communication lines of 24, 48, set position of 72 tracks into 144 platform, and 0 gravity and set calculation. Now, directing lines of symbolism is really understanding how to modify the system lines of planets. Directing lines in a 4-line cycle and in data process communication through its cycle. Line direct signals into 24 over line and graphing communication centered and travel. Directing in modification ground centers crosses line calculation centered and measure. Scales communication centers opens all signals into copy and paste. Directing lines of symbolism line coordination setting sets enabled location system to embed it and travel. Sets core centers line direct signals, and this is from your iOS. 4 lines of signals in line communication setting. Process communication ground centers open all sequence and line position locations to its panel. Panel operations, service, and track location system into 12 lines of measure, 12 lines of scales, and zero gravity in set position. That my equation. So I'm just showing you in a 4-line communication setting, you know exactly what you're looking at through line forward centers into galaxy shift lines of communication. Directing lines high center interference, open all signals into modification grounds. Set course centers, bringing in travel, line rotation, surface, and traction. Directing lines of calculation settings, secure line of measures, 1, 2, and 3 track location of system. Right? Bring it over cross locations, over line signals, in line rotation, surface, and travel. Over line sequence, lines in line direction. Closing signals and modification. Right? Open signals and modification grounds. Sets communication setting and planetary line screen. Directing lines of flux, initiate 1. So the team has to really get into how to use the binary and the argon and then turn it into a website, right? Pages online, data processing, one-line signals, multi-layers, divisional layers, galactic layers, mega layers, multi-division lines of communication layers, track location lines of dimensional doors of layers, access codes, course interference, access line communication setting and processing, directing line course centers, line communication setting to box frames, 4 box frames into 3 cycles and cross location. Process lines of 1, 0, 1 traction, 1 division, outline rotation surface. Now, process communication is 1 symbolism, 1 tractions, 1 cross line signals, and cross location. Directing line signals is the plot from A, lines of C over D over E over F. Process calculation lines to 1 tablet, 1 rotation, 1 surface, 1 traction. 1 direct signals into location system, all 3 calculation lines. Location grid, line signal. Directing lines, modification, ground shift, line cross locations into a portal that opens all sequence lines of communication setting to an open sequence of open calculation. Directing lines of symbolism, cross location, over cross line communication setting, and process calculation screen line. Directing line course centers into platitude, putting U in the center. Set lines of communication setting and measure. Scale communication grounds, cross and line symbolism, and line rotation surface into time jump, and screen lines at 2 line datations. Process lines of the ground, symbolism line track locations at divots, and lines of earth lines of ground communication. Process calculation lines at 2 panels, split lines of anomaly of space time. Process calculation lines as high center interference, putting lines of Z, 4 lines of A into B, B equals lines of C, C equals lines of D, E equals lines of F, and F equals lines of 144. Track point lines graph, course system in line rotation surface, overall particles, and direct signals configuration of face recognition and pattern recognition. Directing line signals over cross location symbolism and line screen adaptations of traffic through inventory. Directing line communication over cross line signals in dislocation of 4 lines of setting. See the 4? Directing line symbolism over cross location of 8 lines of rotation surface and traction. Bring out through equation, open all signals modification. Okay? So I'm just showing you exactly how powerful it is to recognize these things all through travel, right? So getting into circulatory lines, into balance communication, flux over lines, propellers over screen, anything in travels, anything in rotation system is all levels of alteration. You're alterating skyline grids, skyline panels, skyline surface, and track location. Platitude lines, indirect signals into ripples effects, process calculation and triangulation line calculation setting and processing. Directing lines of panels, process lines of 1, process lines of 8 and 12 in set position. Set course centers, flip lines of anomaly and track location. Directing line screen adaptation of 45 line angle, or line centers indirect signals into modification over cross location system in the same direction. Process calculation of ground centers, open signal, allocate timelines, indirect modification center and travel. Directing signal lines, course center interference, 4 line split lines of anomaly and triangulation line position was programmed. 4 line centers, on-line rotation surface, and its road graphing screen lines adaptation. Process calculation ground lines, open all mapping sequence into panels or walkway surface. Directing line screen adaptations into open sequence into black holes and track location to its system, all through track location. Done by equation, right? So the higher you go, the more it gets complicated, and the more it gets easier to understand you through how to see yourself through iOS, setting lines of communication lines, but it's all image lines and screen lines adaptation to its surface. Come into the atmospheres, the hemispheres, the stratospheres, the bio, the branium, anything line communication system, all levels puts lines, calculations, screen lines adaptation to balance. flux of communication lines and center operation. Okay? So it's amazing how you see all lines of communications of frequencies all at once in traction. All right, so we get a better understanding how this all works in the flux location system. Okay, all through prime circuits, primates, circuitory. Okay, understand lines, circuitory, circulation, rotation. Start with that, right? 4-line signals, diamond core line, shift lines, a phenomenon. Okay, you're in the center operation, set position, right? Flux over 1. Okay, flux over Z. You can do whatever you want, but you know what you're doing, right? That's you come in your own binary of your own algorithm to your own line communication setting, because all you're doing is your plasma line screen adaptations or open sequence locations of pi. Generate the communication screen, compressors over line, and direct signals modification. Ground center lines of 1, intelligence over 2. There's the intelligence. That's it. Let's open the ground lines. Set lines of communication system. See how it's a different image? Applied to lines of grounds, open sequence, open panels into line screen adaptation X3000 and travel. Set platforms over cross locations in invisible line screen adaptation. Process lines of platform 1, 2, and Z lines of C over lines of G. Directing lines of G over lines of H into platitude line screen adaptation of processing and direct signals to modification. Change it again. Okay? Everything symbolizes a different frequency, right? But it's intelligence changing its form, changing its shape, changing its directions, changing its computer operation. Now it's locked in the system. Okay? Setting lines of communications, indirect signals, and modification. Okay? So all you're doing is just doing higher lines of the mind line, the alteration system through images and primers. Setting 2 placements and screen lines adaptation, right? Process lines of 0, 0, 0, and 4 lines of setting, right? Set position of 1 over 2 over cross lines of 3 over 6 over 8. Direct line symbolism across over 3 over 6 over 5 over 9 and track location. Laser track lines, directing line symbolism over cross locations, directing lines of symbolism, line screen adaptations over cross location of symbolism. Process lines of 1, X3000 comes in, right? Ground centers lines of 1 in position of 2, 6, 8, 12, 16, 24, 75,000 line screens, and center core system and crop circles and track location. Crop circles, okay, 75,000 line settings. Then we come in line communication setting and travel. Okay, so it's the same image, different frequencies. So it's morphing into letters, numbers, shapes, and its own traffic of its own inventory, of its own binary, of its own algorithm, going very, very fast. Your body is in metric meters of scale on seconds, minutes, and hours. So it's about understanding how to travel the mechanism. Lines of travel of grounds, lines of travel location of powers, and position or highways in line screen adaptation. Process lines over cross locations of 45 lines of an angle. Okay? Or line communication high shift location, or anything line screen adaptation and process calculations over line signals into 45 angle in the opposite direction. So it's all about understanding all different angles, right? We got into that before. So once you understand the line screen adaptation system, you can put your placements to your central system. Let's get in intersections of 4. Okay? Set lines of A, set lines of B. C equals lines of E. E equals lines of 1. 1 equals lines of E. Okay? Now, it's like tic-tac-toe. Line connections X and O's. Direct lines of X over lines of core lines of O. X lines of communications, right? That doesn't work. Travel point lines of graph X, X position locations. 1 equals lines. X. 1 equals lines in platforms of E factors equals lines of factors over lines equals C in travel. Now, directing lines of symbolism is very complicated stuff now, guys. This is all tic-tac-toe. It's the computer. Now, how I play tic-tac-toe is different from how you play tic-tac-toe. I play tic-tac-toe from my position to my O line connection setting. Connection lines of the I, the location of the O, and the S line screen. Initial lines of operation of surface in location setting to its intelligence operation to a systematic system all through secondism. Set core lines and calculation lines into a P line, rotation lines to an H line, and core centers line to an E line, and position lines of A, and position of R, and position lines of T. H-E-A-R-T is heart. Directing line symbolism lines H over X, E lines of O, lines of core centers lines of A over C, line position location R lines of over G, G lines of R, line rotation surface and tractions, and T in position lines and X line rotation surface and track location setting and line rotation. All through traction, right? And it's all done through computer operation of my system on a 4-line angle and set calculations in all directions. Okay? So there's always different ways to do formulas of letters, numbers, shapes, and system through your iOS, right? You just have to understand your initial platforms and how you are in position location of your systems. Basically, how to log in your settings, you know exactly how to use it in traction in all ways and forms, right? So I just showed you in all ways and forms how to play tic-tac-toe for my computer operation, right? So let's go through a 4-line split lines and a 45 line of intersection core centers and direct signals. Let's change in this locations. See how it has a different angle? See how it has a different angle? See, the more you go around the pi, the more you see the measure and the scale, and then you see direct and you see all direct and redirect at the same time. Set position lines of travels. It goes like this. Right in the hologram, inside. This is the solid matter in direct signal. Okay? But it needs a platform and grounds. It needs a power in the center. And it needs its atmosphere, and it needs its highway and track location, right? So platforms come in setting, okay? Power comes in setting, okay? And atmospheres come in setting, okay? So it metric meters, scales, earth line transits, and line conditions, divots, and rotation surface and track location system, all through operation system and travel, okay? That's all it is, just all lines of travel, nothing else, nothing more, right? But you see it on a 4-line angle in line communication, right? So the more you come into the formula, the more you come into your equation, it gets a lot more complicated, but a lot more easier, right? So you have to understand, what is E? What is E? What does it mean, right? So you start lines of position. There's pi, right? E here, E here, E here, E here. So at lines 1, 2, 3, position of 5, right? So E equals lines of 5, okay? So slash pi. Okay, and then you go into all levels, execute, all right, 2-point settings into 3 weather panels and traction. Directing lines core centers and 3 line signals, 1 in position of 2, in position of 3, in line position of grounds. Now, directing lines and core centers comes into a boxing frame and track line communication. Setting coordinate settings and direct signals into modification lines of 1, in position of 2, in position of 6 over 8 over travel. Directing line course centers into location grid and line direction. Crossing line conditions of center line, open sequence, and panel of operation surface and traction. Now, you put that on a different angle, you got a different lines of sequence. Right? Different formula now, right? So every time you're going through northwest, south, and east, you're changing the line screen adaptations into all levels of your computer operation system. Different angles, different processing, different uplinks, different downloads, upgradings, uploading systems, and travel. Right? But you understand the mechanism lines and screen lines adaptation system and out calculation settings is allocate time frames, measures, and scales. Let's start with lines of core line center interference of Z. Z, this is the pi. Okay? So how do I go from Z in a clocking system in 3 tractions, right? Well, Z equals line, which lines the underscores, line direct signals, 1 signal, into 2 platforms, into box, into flux, and screen adaptations, over cross line symbolism, E factors over line, and direct signals and triangulation. Now, coming into that through astral projections and travel, points, lines of setting, and graph communications into your projections. Directing core centers, line direct signals, and compressors over line, direct lines of core centers and line communication system through operation. Change it again, line direct signals, so you got a new formula, new equation. Downshift lines of anomaly, cross locations, over line symbolism. Directing lines of modification lines of 3 over 2 over tracks over lines of 1 set position calculations. So I'm constantly changing the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols in a continuous flow, guys. So it never has a direct line view and line rotation system at the same frequency. If the mind is going too fast in travel, mechanism location setting to the formulas of its equation, to its binary, to its algorithm and calculations, transitions, or location setting. Coming into the transformation screen and direct signals and modification grounds opens all symbolism line screen adaptation of center and processing. Process lines of one over cross lines of communication system, all through track location. Okay? But it's amazing when you bring it in, exactly what you're doing through calculations. Right? So if I get a equation, let's say in a 4-line calculation, so let's go through 4. Right? So you see 4 like this. Right? And then you see 4 like this. Right? Bring it in. Okay? And then you see 4 like this. Right? So you have to see it on a 4-line angle. This way, 4 lines of communication and setting. Right? Then you go into 4 over lines, equals lines of 6. So let's add 2 more lines of signals to error indications. Let's add 6 over 8 and 8 over 12. So 4 equals lines of 6 equals 12. Okay? So it's really understand how to use the force of recognition, how you basically, you're in control, you're in command through your IOS. And set position, your initial, your operations of your systems, your intelligence, and our operations to a system, all through transitions. Okay? So it's very powerful when you start to understand how to use that through your formulas of equation to your calculations. All right? So we're going to stop there because it's very complicated stuff. All through formula, all through equation, all through primer. Okay? That's where you indicate the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, where they go. Right? It's like the clocking system, right? There's a reason why you have a clocking system of 12 here. There's a reason why 1 is here, 2 is here, 3 is here, 4 is here, 5 is here, 6 is here. Everything is in placement through the center of pi. Okay? This is pi. Right? This is pi. Okay? Everything flux through pi. Okay? Everything flux through pi. Okay? And then central system this way, and travel. Okay, then your central this way, 12 over 6 over travel. Okay? So, you have to understand how to spin, how everything rotates, how everything spins. And once you understand the spinning cycles, it creates its portals and its realms of communication. Okay? Propellers lines at all settings, but you have to understand the opposite. And you have to understand the calculation setting, the interactions. Opposite of track, right? Set lines of figure 8 motion and track locations. So once they come together, they open up a portal, a stargate, and line communication with its realm. Flux of a line and direct signals into security line defense and set position. Okay? So that's what we have to understand through mechanism. We have engineering skills that we have to really understand how to use the process through calculate modify in your central systems and calculations. All right. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that inline position location. Let's travel. Talk to you soon. Adios.